بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. As we have been talking yesterday about the power into the narration of the Quran, of the stories, how it envelope and carry in it all what the believer is in needing or needs into his journey of life. The last ayah from Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. Into their stories is a great reminder, it's a lesson. And it's not a fabricated tale. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was witness over all things, knowing everything subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ أَن تَصْدِيقَ الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, and fulfilling and saying the same stories as the books before, and actually reiterating them, correcting them, and being evidence to them. Then قال وتفصيل لكل شيء, given the details of everything, the fundamental of the aqidah, the way of the conduct, and all the news of your future that you are in need to help you be guided. And when I say the news of the future, truly, I mean when you read, you know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is going to happen to you next. Is not in the details of the dunya, but how you set your path and how you have the major guidelines in your life, and to be blessed and to be protected and to be in the canopy of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a guidance and a mercy to the believers. Now amazingly, we all know, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, this is part of our belief that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be fulfilled with no doubt. The issue is, how do you behave with the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promise you that He will provide for you. How do you behave with that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us that He will give victory to the messenger, to the followers of the messenger, for people who Allah follow His guidance. How do we behave with that? And that, subhanAllah, that behavior, the way how we view it, the way how we believe in it, the way how we interact with it, that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is helping us to understand in the Quran. قال حتى إذا استيأس الرسل, subhanAllah, to the point that the messenger comes to the end of their hope. When I say end of their hope, not of their certitude in their heart, but how these people that they are conveying the message, how they're going to react. They say this is the end. They're not going to be accept Islam. And one of the interpretation, حتى استيأس الرسل, they say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to decree, we are pleased with it. So not anymore thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishment is going to come, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help. For them, whatever is going to happen is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree, pleased with it. That's the situation. When they came to that point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send His help. Therefore, there is the maximum of the effort that the believer they put, and that is the requirement to trigger Allah's help to you. Why? Because in that maximum of effort is testimony and evidence of your sincerity and testimony of your true faith. Because if you ask in Allah dua, after a month you didn't see anything, 2, 3, 4 months, you're going to stop making this dua and you forget about it at all. Why? Because you didn't get any answer. Someone, for example, he's sick, he's been asking, then that's it. You know, they get tired from making dua. So the word istayasa, it is the same word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the surah to give us the one of the true hero, if you can say the true hero of Surah Yusuf, is Yaqub alayhi salam. Is Yaqub. When you see Yaqub, and this is very important for us, this is the way of the tadabbur of the Quran. Yaqub, he had heard the vision of his son Yusuf. He knew that this child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gonna bless him and be prophet. He's been gone. They told him he was killed. And he never had a doubt about Allah's promise. Amazingly, surprisingly, the promise that he had from an interpretation of a dream, because the shaitan can say, what interpretation? But because his father, his grandfather, Ibrahim alayhi salam, was going to actually submit to slaughter his son out of a dream. See the connection? قال ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم. So when we worship the God of Ibrahim, we also will behave with the milati of Ibrahim. He submitted his heart, his soul for a dream, because they know that a dream, it's a hint, it's a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same for Yaqub. His son is out there. However, that nature of human beings, subhanAllah, to be sad, to have anguish, to be, subhanAllah, that's what they ask him and criticize him about that. He said, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Leave me alone. This is between me and Allah. I didn't complain to you. For subhanAllah, the power of the belief in Yaqub had him to go like for years of sabr. Years of sabr. Even subhanAllah, after his second son was also taken, he still sabr. قال صبر جميل. Beautiful sabr. Sabr jameel with no complaint. Sabr jameel with continuing to worship. Sabr jameel with continue to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sabr jameel. And subhanallah, there is a lot of lesson to go through the Yaqub. But we come to the last point, when everyone, subhanallah, lost hope. Yaqub not. Why? Because he believed in the promise of Allah. That's how our problem, how we behave with it. Look how he endured it. To the point that he lost his sight, subhanallah, from anguish, from worrying, from sadness. And he said, do never give up in the hope of Allah. Go and check. وَلَا تَيْأَسُوا مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. And Allah telling you in the end of the surah, حَتَّى إِذَا اسْتَيْأَسَ الرُّسُلُ. And Yaqub is telling you, do never give up into the hope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then right away in the same page, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you. So the story of Yusuf, it is the best of the story, as among the scholars, because they said all the story of the Quran are the best, and the story of Yusuf because it's a complete. It has, subhanAllah, from sadness to the happiness, from dispersion and being far from each other to the unity, from the humiliation of being in a prison to be a king, to be, subhanAllah, from all the aspects, from difficulties to relief, from subhanAllah drought to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings. So all the aspects that it can be in our journey of life, I mean, it is an opportunity for us to look at your life, at the story of your life through the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And then the most important, when you're navigating all the struggle and all the challenge in your life, remember, never lose hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because look, the first thing that Yaqub alayhi salam, after regaining his sight, and he had the good news of his son, قال, I did not tell you that I know from Allah that you do not know. That is the real knowledge. When we want to learn, that is the real knowledge. What is the real knowledge? To know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree His terms, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will have you to go through trying, but you navigate them with your sincere, certain, subhanallah, belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given us as an example into this ayat, to have that strong belief. Whatever happened, you have two elements that it will help you to navigate all the challenges of your life. And Yusuf alayhi salam said it, how he was saved, how he was being protected. قال إنه من يتقي ويصبر. Taqwa and sabr. Look, Yaqub, extreme high level of taqwa, and high peak of sabr. The same for Yusuf. Therefore, as a believer in Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gifting us Ramadan to increase in two: taqwa and sabr. Sabr during the day, not eating, not doing anything, subhanAllah, away from most of the things that someone usually doing, to be focused with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reciting Quran and making dua, taqwa. So let's invest in the sabr and the taqwa to be from the muhsineen and to be having that level of the iman that will have certain belief, like Yusuf and Yaqub and all the messengers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the end of the surah. ونسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يهدينا سواء السبيل وإلى الصلاة يرحمكم الله.